Hello, everybody, and welcome. So glad to see you all here. We still have about 5 minutes, but before we get started, I'll just give you a couple of little tips. If you have any questions during the presentation, I'll put my PowerPoint slides up in a minute, and we'll start the presentation. But if you have questions, then put them please in the chat. And if you don't want to see that chat window keep popping up on your screen, what you can do right now, if you like, is open it up. You can hover your mouse near the bottom of the screen and click on the chat and open it up. And then you can just drag it over to the side. And that way it'll be out of the way, but you can still keep an eye on it, and you can still put things, your questions in there if you want. Okay. So before we get started, while we're waiting for other people to jump in, why don't you guys all tell me where you're calling from? You can either unmute and tell me, or you can just pop it into the chat and let me know. I'm just always interested to see where everybody is. Last night, we had someone from Australia, and we had people from Europe, and that was pretty dedicated, I thought, because it was like midnight for them, but they were right there. So if you're so inclined, just let me know where you're from, and then we'll just kind of wait to get started. Anybody else have a question before we get going about anything going on with your own dogs? Do you have dogs that tend to get kind of overexcited, or a lot of what we can call excessive barking? And excessive is just that's a kind of a value heavy word. It just depends on what any individual's opinion is about what's excessive. What might be excessive to one person might not be so much to somebody else. So, it's just kind of a matter of opinion. Hi, Bridget. So nice to see you here from Germany. I know that, I try to accommodate different time zones, so people are, not having to, stay up to the middle of the night. But last night we had someone from Australia, and for her it was 11 o'clock in the morning. And of course they're like half a day or almost 2 days ahead of us in my time zone, which is Eastern time zone, New York time. So, okay. Does anybody have any other questions before we get started, or do you want to put anything into the chat and tell me where you're from, where you are today? If not, I can start my PowerPoint and just kind of give you guys an idea of where we're going with this today, so you just kind of have some idea about it. I don't want to get started though until I give other folks a chance to jump in. So let me find the screen that I want. There it is. Okay. Hi, Susie from Texas. I'm in Tennessee, in case anybody didn't already know that. So let's see. Now, what I'd like you to do, guys, is if you can see my PowerPoint screen, I know you're all muted, most of you are. If you can see my PowerPoint screen, just kind of like wave. Okay, awesome. And if you're not already muted, I'm going to ask you to do that. Let me see. Okay. let me just, I'm gonna stop my share for just 1 second before we start, because I just want to, yeah, and we had a bunch of other folks jumping in. And I just want to remind you, if you just got here, welcome, first of all. And if you want to go into the chat and tell me where you're from, that would be awesome. I would love to see that. And if you have any questions during the presentation, just put them into the chat. I may not get to them right away. I'll probably get to most of them after I'm done, but I may stop and check and see if there are any other questions as we go along. But don't think I forgot about you if I don't answer your question right away. So you go ahead and do that. And if you don't want to see that chat screen popping up in the middle of your screen during the presentation, you can just open up the chat right now and drag it over to the side so that it's out of your way, but you can still see it. And it's not like right in the middle of your screen. Okay. All right, guys, so nice to see you all here. Okay. Okay. Right. All right, so let's see. Let me just check and see. Okay, oh, we have Natalia from France, Southern California, Northern California. Lots of folks from the West Coast, from BC and Canada, and then some folks over here on the East Coast as well. And Alaska, hey, welcome. Tima from Alaska, so nice to see you here. Thank you, guys. All right, let me go back to the screen share. And it's just a few minutes after the hour, so we will just get started. And I'm going to keep my fingers crossed that all my dogs stay nice and quiet and don't start to act up. So right now they're busy chewing on their nice comfy chewies. So hopefully they will be nice and quiet. So, okay, guys, so what we're going to talk about today is dogs that get overexcited. And a lot of times that overexcitement, that overarousal, that you can call it like an excessive or an extreme reaction to something that we would consider as ordinary. Obviously, the dog doesn't think it's ordinary because they perceive it as something out of the ordinary and their reaction is extreme. So what we're going to look at today is what's going on with that, how come that happens, and why the things that we traditionally do to address that don't really work. And I'll share a little bit of my own experience because I've been working with this kind of thing for a long, long time. And I have found that a lot of the traditional things that we do don't work. I'll get to that in a minute. But what I want to talk to you about today is what to do instead. And the thing to do instead is going to be maybe a little bit counterintuitive to some of you, but I'm going to try to get to it and explain it so that it hopefully makes some sense to you. So that is where we're going with this. So when dogs are over-aroused and overexcited, it usually manifests in a lot of barking. That's usually the first thing. You know, dogs bark for a lot of reasons. And you know the different voices that your dog has. If your dog is barking because he's alarmed or because he wants something, maybe he wants to go outside to potty, or maybe he's hungry and he wants to eat, or maybe he wants your attention for something. And all of those voices sound different. But when a dog is barking incessantly in what we consider extreme, what we need to do is, instead of trying to suppress it, we need to figure out what's going on with that. What is the cause? So Dogs can use their voices to express anxiety, fear, alarm, but whatever it is, they want relief. Whatever that feeling is, whatever that cause for that excessive barking, what a dog really wants is relief from that. And how we provide relief really makes a difference. Sometimes instead of providing relief, what we do is we add pressure to the pressure the dog is already feeling that is causing that barking in the first place. We don't do that intentionally, but that's the outcome of what traditionally we have done to try to deal with this barking. So let's look at what the real question is, because what we what we think of is, how can I make this stop? How can I make this excessive barking or this excessive over arousal or overexcited in whatever way it expresses itself? How can you make it stop? And my answer to you is that I think we need to ask a different question. What do you want your dog to do instead of barking? Because when your dog has these big feelings that show up in this over arousal, sometimes those big feelings conflict with what you want your dog to do. Your expectations and the dog's actions are in conflict. So if that's the case, then is it fair to say that the dog needs more training? And my answer to that is no, that's not fair. And I'll explain what I mean by that. So 3 reasons why training in a case where a dog is over aroused and overexcited, 3 reasons why training can actually make it worse instead of better. And in my experience, that's kind of what I've seen happen. So the first reason is that dogs have a basic need to feel safe, at peace, and loved. And that need has to be met before they can learn, because when a dog doesn't feel safe, when a dog is anxious, their brain takes them into fight or flight. And fight or flight is almost like a panic mode. They're in survival. And so the learning part of the brain shuts down. And this is neuroscience. This isn't just for dogs. It also happens with people. When you're scared, or when the dog is scared, when a dog doesn't feel safe, he detects something in his environment as a threat. It may realistically be a threat, but maybe it isn't. And if it isn't, it doesn't really matter, because if the dog thinks it is, in the dog's world, it is a threat. And that's, you have to work with the dog in front of you, with the dog's feelings as they are in this moment, not as you wish they were, or if you, the way you want them to be, but as they are right now. So before a dog can learn, he has to feel safe. That's number 1. Number 2 is that emotional well-being brings trust, stability, and calm. And when dogs can trust the world around them, including the people around them, when they feel that their world is stable and predictable, it lets them feel calm. And then they have the freedom to choose to move, because movement for animals is equal to safety, right? An animal that is immobile, that cannot move, is injured or paralyzed or whatever. An animal that cannot move is not safe. So for dogs, movement equals safety. And what we often do when our dogs are over aroused is we ask them to stop moving. We tell them to do things like sit, watch me, lie down, go to that place, come away from, stop looking at that thing that's scaring you. You're on a walk with a dog and he sees someone approaching, walking their own dog, and your dog, for whatever reason, sees that as something scary. So you tell your dog, watch me, sit, watch me. And that takes away the dog's sense of safety from movement, and he also takes away that freedom to observe the thing that he's frightened of. If there was a bear at your door and somebody said, just don't look at it, would that make you feel safe? Of course not. You know, you still know it's there, but not looking at it makes you feel even more scared, because where is it? You know, that's why, that's how horror movies are made, right? You can't see the scary thing. It's out there, but you can't see it. So when we take those things away from dogs, we take away their emotional well-being, we take away their sense of trust, because you're asking the dog to do something that's in conflict with his sense of safety. So it kind of undermines that trust relationship that you have with your dog. And then number 3 is that learning is stressful. And of course, learning is stressful, and that's just part of the learning process. But in order to learn and to manage the stress that is built into the whole learning process, dog has to feel safe. So if you're asking him to learn something when he's already in emotional distress, the learning part of his brain is shut down. So you're adding to that conflict and pressure. So those are the 3 reasons that I'm going to delve into in a little bit more detail with you right now. The 3 reasons why asking a dog that is in distress to learn is really unfair. So let's talk about number 1, the emotional needs. So the dog in the picture here, one of the things I like to do with people when we're talking about dogs and emotional stress is to evaluate the dog's body language, to really, really look at what the dog is telling us with his facial expression, with his movement, with his language. Where is he looking? How does his face look? What is he doing with his ears, his mouth, his tail, muscle tension? This dog has a little bit of tension around his eyes and his forehead and at the base of his ears. Not so much that, in my opinion, I don't think this dog is over threshold, but to me, he looks worried. His mouth is closed, so he's not stress panting. His ears are forward, so he could be alert, but they're not as forward as they could be in a curious alert position. They look like they're just a little bit folded back. So that would be my evaluation of the dog in this picture. He's not over threshold, but he's worried. So what might I do? I might offer him an opportunity to relieve his stress in some of the stress relieving ways that I'm going to talk about in a bit. One of them is to get more distance from whatever the event is that's making him worried. I would see if he wanted to move farther away. I wouldn't ask him not to look at the thing, whatever it was, but I would ask him if he wanted to move away from it a little bit and get some distance. And then I would observe his body language and see if there were any changes. So if you are constantly trying to manage a dog that is in emotional overarousal, and that constant stress on you impacts your lifestyle, then one of the most important reasons that you need to address it and try to find ways to improve the dog's emotional stability is that you're missing out on a lot of the pleasure and enjoyment of having a dog as a companion. Because having a companion that is worried all the time kind of takes away some of the pleasure in that relationship. So that's why it's important to deal with this. So the basic need to feel safe, at peace, and loved has to be met first before the dog can learn. And if we block the freedom to naturally express emotions by using management, redirection, or avoidance that adds pressure to the dog. So that was what I was talking about a minute ago, is telling a dog to sit, look at me. So taking away his freedom to move, taking away his freedom to gather information about his environment so that he knows how to process it and respond to it. If you take away that freedom to get information, that's a basic freedom that we all have if we're sentient beings, as dogs are. And if we try to bury that feeling that the dog has, it's just going to grow. So let me just share one of my personal experiences with you over the years working with people and their dogs. And I have been training dogs for a long time. So a lot of the things that I did in the past were traditional things. So if a dog was over aroused, we would use the, traditional practices of, positive training practices like counter conditioning and desensitization. And those are perfectly acceptable and very valid training practices. They're used by positive reinforcement trainers, but one of the things that I noticed for some of the dogs, not all of them, but for some of them, is that we could get them to change their behavior by desensitizing them and giving them another trained behavior to do instead. We could do that successfully, but I would get the feeling that the dogs were complying but weren't really happy, that they were just doing it because they figured they had to, but they still had that emotional pain is the best word I guess I can use. They still were dealing with that emotional pain related to whatever that stress was. And it just made me a little uneasy. And I knew that even though we were getting success, the dogs weren't really happy. So one of the reasons that I have developed this program that I'm talking about with you now is that I wanted to find a way to get better behavior from the dogs, to get them to be more calm and to get them to be a little more emotionally stable. But I also wanted them to be happy. I didn't want a dog that looked like this dog in the picture. He's worried. He's not over threshold. He's probably behaving perfectly fine. His owners might look at him and say, oh, what a well-trained, well-behaved dog that is. But what I'm seeing in that dog is that there's some stress underneath it all. And that's the thing that I want to address with you. So going to the next reason, which is related to the dog's well-being, that the dog's emotional well-being is based on trust, security, consistency, and calmness. And all of those things are related to the dog's happiness. So this, the 5 bullet points that you see listed here are really the core of the program that I use to address this issue of overarousal in dogs. And I call it the A stack, and some of you may have already downloaded that PDF. If you listened to the talk that I gave on the Puppy Summit recently, I talked about this very thing, about addressing your dog's emotional well-being. And this 5-step system starts with, instead of pulling the dog away from the thing that is causing that emotional stress, we let the dog observe it. And we acknowledge for the dog, I acknowledge that you are feeling this way. I acknowledge that you see that. Let me give you a practical example so it makes sense. Your dog looks out the window and sees your neighbor walking his dog down the street. And for whatever reason, your dog detects that as a threat and starts to bark. The reason for that threat detection has a root in something in the dog's history, which we don't need to discuss right now. But for whatever reason, the dog detects that as a threat and starts to bark and bark and bark. And what traditional training might say is tell the dog to go lie down on his bed. Tell the dog to sit and look at you. Take the dog away from that source of his distress and have him do something else. So we pile on instructions that we expect the dog to obey. But the dog is in fight or flight mode. The dog is stressed. The learning part of the dog's brain is shut down because that's what happens. That's just neuroscience, biology. And we don't have any control over it. That's just what happens. So asking the dog to learn and follow instructions is adding to the distress and the pressure that the dog feels. So instead, what we do is we simply go over, and this is going to sound counterintuitive. And when I tell my clients to do this the first time, they just kind of look at me like, are you sure? What are you talking about? So what you do is so the dog is barking out the window and you go over and say, I see that you're barking at, you can word it whatever way feels comfortable to you. And I tell them, you don't have to use my words. Use your own words. But the main thing is you don't tell your dog what to do. You don't tell your dog to do anything different from what he's doing. You acknowledge what he's doing. I see that you notice, Johnny next door walking Buddy down the street. I see that's what you're barking at. And then the next step is appreciate. So you validate that feeling. I know that makes you upset. So just for a moment, imagine that the dog was not a dog, but a person in distress. And imagine that the person was in distress. And I'm going to use my bear example again. There's a bear out there. You wouldn't tell that person, go sit down over there and be quiet. Stop looking at the bear. That doesn't help. You say, I see it too. Oh my goodness, that's really upsetting. And then the next step, now my bear analogy kind of breaks down a little bit because we don't want bears to break into the house. But anyway, you get the point. So the next step after you validate the emotion, I know that upsets you, is you accept what the dog is experiencing in this moment right now. You accept the dog in front of you. And the reason that is so important, and really the key to success with this system, is that the opposite of accepting the dog is resisting or rejecting the dog's feelings. And if you reject the dog's feelings, they don't go away. It's what I mentioned earlier. If you bury those feelings, they just grow. So, and again, it might feel a little counterintuitive, but if you think about it in human terms, it does make a lot of sense. And what I often tell people to do is imagine someone treating you the way you're treating your dog. How would you feel about that? So if you were upset and someone said, I see that you're upset, and I see how that's really bothering you, that's really making you upset, and I know that's hard, isn't it? You would accept the dog's feelings. And it's going to take repetitions in order for the dog to buy into this system, because what you're doing is trying to change a behavior that's become a default behavior for the dog. It's become a habit. And habits don't change, in a minute. It takes some repetition. And what you're doing when you go through these first 3 steps, which makes the fourth and the fifth step possible, is you are mirroring calmness. Because when you say to your dog, instead of stop that, sit, go over there, which raises your anxiety level, makes you anxious, makes you tense, right? It does. Instead of doing that, when you acknowledge how the dog feels, and you don't give him directions or instructions or tell him what to do, you just validate what he's feeling, you just can't help but do that in a calm, gentle, compassionate way. You just can't do it any other way and be honest about it. So if you're doing it honestly, you're going to be calm. And dogs, people do the same thing. Dogs co-regulate their emotions with what's going on around them. So if your energy, and you're right beside your dog, and your energy is, I understand, I accept what you're doing, and you're honest and sincere about it, you're going to be calm. Your dog's energy is going to start to mirror yours. And the dog is going to start to feel calmer. And after you go through this process a number of times, you're going to start to see changes start to take place a lot sooner. There are lots of micro steps in here, which I'm not going to take the time now to go through, which we work through step by step when I work with people one-on-one with this. But what the first 3 steps bring you to is the point where you can, instead of tell the dog what to do, you ask the dog what he wants to do next. I see that you're upset about that. I see it's making you a little bit scared. I can see you're nervous about that and you're feeling scared. And I know that that's scary for you. I know you feel that way. What would you like to do now? So you ask the dog, what would you like to do next? In the beginning, the dog won't know how to answer that because he doesn't expect that question. He probably never asked him that before, especially when he's upset and barking. So he won't know what to do at first. So sometimes you have to help him. You might say, what would you like to do? And if the dog doesn't do something, sometimes they'll walk away. That's an answer. Sometimes they'll just look at you. That's an answer. Sometimes they'll look a little confused. So you might say in the beginning, you won't have to do this all the time, but in the beginning, you will say, would you like to come over here with me and maybe get a cookie out of the cookie jar? Or would you like to go out in the backyard and maybe potty, take a potty time? Or would you like to come into the next room with me and kind of hang out on the couch because I'm going to watch the game on TV? So you might offer some options to the dog, but they're not instructions. That's the important thing. The dog doesn't have to do what you're suggesting. If you say, would you like to come and watch TV with me, and the dog walks away and maybe picks up a toy, that's an answer, and that's a valid answer, and that's his choice. The key is that we're giving the dogs choice, which leads to the goal of this whole 5-step process, which is the dog has agency. And what do I mean by agency? Agency is something that all healthy, emotionally healthy individuals must have. The opposite of agency is helplessness. And if you feel helpless, that's not healthy. And dogs that feel trapped and helpless are in severe emotional distress. So the goal of this process is to give dogs agency, which means that they feel that they have control over events in their environment that impact their well-being. For whatever reason, your dog barks at your neighbor walking his dog down the street because he senses that that is having a negative impact on his well-being. That's not realistic from our point of view. We know that that is no threat to the dog, but for whatever reason, the dog thinks it is. So what we need to do in this 5-step process is give him choices, other ways to react to watching someone walk down the street. Give him another choice, which is to choose to go and do something else. Go lie down somewhere, go chew on his favorite chew toy, go play with a toy, just go hang out somewhere. Whatever he does when he's feeling calm, that's an option for him. The reason dogs bark is because they don't know they have that option. The point of this process is to show them that they do. They do have another way to manage that experience. Okay, so I hope that's all making sense to you all. All right, so the third thing in our third reason is that learning is stressful. And I won't go into too much detail about this. I think it's pretty clear that if you're asking a dog to problem solve, and to learn new information, to gather and process and filter new information, that is going to be stressful. And if he is in emotional distress, he can't put his full attention on the cognitive task. So this next slide, now don't be scared, this looks complicated. We're not going to go into all the details of this. But I will just tell you that this hierarchy of dog needs is in a book, which it's a book by Linda Michaels, and her quote is up there in the upper right-hand corner. There's never a justification to use pain, fear, dominance devices, or training methods, dominance training methods with our dogs. So dominance devices are things like, electric shock, pinch collars, physical punishment, anything that inflicts pain or fear on a dog. Those are dominance devices, and there's never a use for them. They may appear to get results, but they do so by suppressing emotions, which as you know by now, is not a healthy way to train. So what I want you to see in this diagram is that this hierarchy of needs starts with biological needs, which most of you are fulfilling those needs for your dogs, right? I mean, the dogs, they eat well, they have a safe, comfortable place to live. They're in temperature controlled environments. They're not exposed to any dangers or threats in their environment. They get good medical care. So we meet those biological needs. The next level are the emotional needs that we've been talking about, right? And the emotional needs have to be met before we can go up this hierarchy. And you'll see that next is social needs, which I'll talk about in a second. And then training needs, which are learning, and cognitive needs, which are problem solving and managing novelty and choice and all of that. Those are more advanced, and only dogs that have an emotionally stable environment and that have all of their social and training needs met can successfully engage in cognitive problem solving. So let's go down to the blue part of this hierarchy, the emotional needs, and look at the list of things. You've seen that list before. Security, that means they have to feel safe. They have to feel loved. They have to trust that the humans and animals also in their environment have their back and will take care of them, and that there's predictability and consistency in their world. They're not constantly confronted by shocks and surprises and unpredictable things that throw them off balance, and that the humans in their life provide them with benevolent leadership. That's kind, caring, compassionate empathy, not dominance, fear, force. Okay. So the social needs, which I'm not going to get into now, but those are essential before you can train your dog. And that's bonding with people and with other animals, with other dogs and other animals in their life. They have to feel safe around the other animals in their lives. And sometimes we see dogs that come from very, very emotionally deprived situations, abusive situations, and they don't know how to play. And that's because their biological needs may not have been met, and their emotional needs weren't met. So they don't know how to play, because to play, there has to be trust, right? You have to trust that there's going to be a good outcome. And this is why, I'll throw this in here now, this is why I refer to the relationship that people have with their dogs, the good foundation relationship, as one of a parent. And it has nothing to do with that sentimental thing that, our dogs are like our fluffy children. It's not that. What is the role of a parent? A parent is a guide, a protector, an advocate, and a teacher. A parent is looking out for the best interests of the one that they're responsible for. And that's why I prefer the concept of parenting as the relationship of people with dogs. And some people refer to it as a guardian, a dog guardian, and that's great too. That's fine. I just kind of like the idea of parenting. So, all right. So, on all of these, the list of training methods over here, you'll see that we have counter conditioning and desensitization, positive reinforcement, management. All of those are acceptable methods. They're all useful. They all have their role and their place, depending on the circumstances and situation. Some are a better choice than others, and it just depends. And the quote that I chose to copy over here: dogs must be happy in order to learn, pay attention, and problem solve. And that is the reason that I wanted to look more deeply into the emotional well-being of dogs and why over-aroused dogs become stressed. And this diagram, I'm actually going to give it to you. I'm going to put the link to this in the chat in a minute. This is a dog's emotional cup. And what I want you to look at on the left side is the things that dogs do to fill their emotional cup. And some of these things are things that we think are things that we shouldn't allow. Sniffing, chewing. If you're out on a walk with your dog, a lot of times don't sniff, keep walking, don't dig, don't bark at something. Those are all things that fill a dog's emotional cup. The freedom to make choices, the freedom to move, these are so important. Excuse me, let me just take a quick drink. Okay. And having a good safe place to rest is all important. And let me just drink again. Okay. Over on the right-hand side, the thing that I want you to look at is denying access to reinforcers. And if you think about some of the things that people often tell you to do, if your dog is jumping on you, just ignore him, turn your back and look away. And a lot of times what happens is the dogs just jump on your back. That doesn't really address what the dog is asking for. The dog is asking for connection, and maybe the way he's asking for it is not acceptable, but that's what he's asking for. And so you need to find other ways to meet that emotional need without ignoring the dog and without denying him the access to reinforcers. So yeah, I'm going to give you this chart because there's a lot to take in here, and I think it's very, very well worth having that as something that you can refer to and read all the fine print in there. So just hang in. In a couple of minutes, I'm going to put it in the chat, and you can just go ahead and download it. So over arousal is a way that dogs express their big feelings. And instead of trying to put a Band-Aid on it and make it stop, what we need to do is find a way to match our expectations with the dog's need. And it can be done. You don't have to just tolerate it. You don't have to resort to being frustrated and upset and angry about it. There are ways to bring together the dog's needs and your expectations and have a harmonious meeting of the minds with that. And the way that I describe this is helping dogs gain what I call emotional intelligence. And you know, that's a term you probably have heard that before. It's used to describe people. And what it means is that a dog has, and it's the same for a person, a dog's inner emotional state of happiness requires benevolent leadership. And you can create that, and you can create that emotional intelligence with that benevolent leadership. So we mentioned play before, and play is connected to a dog's freedom to express his nature, freedom to move, and freedom to naturally express the things that feel natural and normal to him. So these are the details of what emotional intelligence is. It's the ability to communicate without conflict. When a baby needs something, it expresses it with crying. It's distressed. And we understand that the baby hasn't developed emotional intelligence. But adults, or as we're growing, and dogs that are emotionally confident can express their needs without this over arousal, without this over excitement. So a dog that notices someone walking their dog down the street and sees it as a threat can express that need to have you look at. So what would that look like with an emotionally intelligent dog? The dog might alert to it, might look at it, might just say, woof, check that out. And you might say, yep, I see that. Yep, he's walking his dog. Interesting. And the dog might say, okay, no big deal. That's what we're looking for, that they can communicate their needs without conflict. The dog is socially comfortable. can greet people, and greeting over excitement when they're greeting with friendly, wagging their tail, jumping, spinning, jumping on people. That is over arousal and is also stressful for the dog, because the dog is expressing a need that's not being met, because the expectations of the person are not the same as the dog. It's out of balance. Dogs don't, a person doesn't greet an overexcited dog on the same level that the dog is being greeted, that the dog is expecting to be greeted. So socially comfortable and socially appropriate. Emotional intelligence means you can self-regulate emotions. The dog can choose to relieve his stress in a positive way. Emotional intelligence means play. The dog can freely express his natural behaviors at an appropriate time in an appropriate way. And the dog feels happy. This was the piece that was missing that I wanted to get to, that I wanted to find. So emotionally intelligent dogs can communicate, they're socially comfortable, they can self-regulate, they can play, and they're happy. That's what we're striving for. So this chart kind of takes you through the steps from extreme reactivity to agency, which I mentioned earlier, the ability to feel that you can control the things in your environment that affect your well-being. A reactive dog sees the event and immediately perceives it as a threat, and the reaction is instant. People with reactive dogs will say, the dog just explodes so fast, I couldn't control it because it happens in an instant. And the dog is already frantically barking, and it's almost without warning. That's because the event is equal to the reaction. They're this one and the same thing. But the next step in the process is that the dog discovers that when he sees the event, whatever it is, he can feel safe at a distance. He learns how to go to a safe distance where he can discover that it's calm at that distance. The next step in the process is that the dog discovers that he can see the event, and even at a closer distance, he understands that he has the choice to disengage from it. He can look away from it and do something different. And what dogs often do is they go to their default comfort behaviors. And a lot of times it's sniffing. They'll turn around and start sniffing the ground, or they'll look away and, try to investigate something else. That's a normal step in the process. And then finally, when they see the event, they will discover they can self-regulate their emotions, and they can choose to feel calm. They may choose to get a distance away. They may choose to walk away. They may choose to sniff, but they understand that they can control the things in their environment that impact their well-being. So there's no need for reactivity. I'm also going to give you this chart as a gift, because I think it's important to have this. It's important to see the total picture. There's one more thing I want to look at. This chart, and the reason I want you to see this is to understand that this process is circular. It's not a linear process, which, looking at this one, you may think that it is, because that's the way it's set up visually. But I want you to see that it's not linear. You don't finish with one step and go to the next, because a dog may be reactive in one situation and feel perfectly calm in another. But that reactivity in a given situation is still there. So you may have to address the reactivity in a more circular fashion. So in this, we want to go from chaos to calm. So inside that blue circle, you see the reactive behavior. So a dog that is reacting to impulses without any regulation, because the impulse is going to be there. The problem is how the dog regulates his reaction to the impulse. So on the outside of the circle, we have a dog that is self-regulated. So he knows how to regulate his reactions to the impulse, and he's calmer. Over on the right-hand side of that triangle, we see a dog that feels insecure. He doesn't feel safe in his in that particular environment. When he is more regulated, he feels confident. And then down at the bottom of the triangle, the base of the triangle, a dog that's inattentive cannot pay attention, focus his attention on solving a problem or figuring out a task. But when he's in his calm state of mind, in that part of his brain where learning and cognitive processes are activated, he can be attentive. He can focus on learning, on paying attention, on following instructions. So the dog needs to be calm, and it goes in a cycle. That's the thing that I want you to grasp for that, you know, just because a dog is calm in one situation doesn't mean he's not going to be reactive in another one. And sometimes people get a little confused about that, but don't be confused. And then this is just a summary of the A-stack method. Some of you may have downloaded the detailed explanation of this, and I'm also including that in the little gift that I'm going to give you. So in a minute, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and see if any of you have any questions. I'm going to look at the chat and see if there's anything that you want to ask, give you an opportunity to unmute and ask questions if you want to. But I just want to emphasize that what we're working toward and what I want you to grasp as an overall concept is the fact that emotionally insecure dogs express that with arousal and reactivity. And suppressing that behavior doesn't solve it. What solves it is helping the dog become more emotionally intelligent. And that's what I work on. That's the detailed program that I work about. I'm going to put this one slide up for a second. I just want you to know that you can reach out to me with questions. If you hit reply to any email that you get from me, it goes to this email. You can just send a regular email if you want to. That's perfectly fine too. And I want you to know that I answer every email personally. I don't have anybody else doing that for me. I check that one email account, and if you ask me a question, I answer you. I may not be able to give you a complete answer that solves your problem, because a lot of the times the things that you ask require a more involved answer, and I'm perfectly willing to do that if you want to get on a one-on-one call with me. And that's where you can do it. I can put that also in the chat, or I can email that out to you if you want to do that. I'm more than happy to do that. And you can also send me a text at that number. Okay, so I'm going to stop the sharing right now, guys, and I am going to go to the chat, and I am going to pop in the link to that that free download for you, and that has the emotional cup, and it has the reactivity progression, going from reactivity to agency, the process for that. I think it's good for you to have that. And it also has the download for the A-stack. So let's see. Okay. So Connie, you had a question. Um, what if it's your leash dog that is lunging at another dog? Yeah, yeah. Okay. So leash reactivity. Connie, if you want to unmute and talk about that, you can do that. It's up to you. You don't have to, but you're welcome to do that if you want. But that is a really good question. That if you take your dog for walks, now I don't know all the details of Connie's situation, so I'm just going to put a hypothetical example out there. And this is pretty common, so it's not that hypothetical because I know this happens with a lot of people. So you're walking your dog and your dog is on leash. You already know that your dog is going to react that way, barking and lunging, like Connie says. If your dog sees another dog, hi Connie, do you want to describe it in more detail?
Well, basically, when I take her on walks, as soon as she spies a dog, she gets barky, tries to lunge, and she's 52 pounds and I'm 100 pounds. So she has little pull me down on the ground.
Oh no. Okay.
So yeah, it's any dog at any time. It could be across the street and she will still react.
Yeah. Right. So the distance, so the distance that you are from the other dog is pretty significant then. If it's even
Yes, it can
across the
be.
street, it can be anywhere. So as soon as she gets sight of another dog, yeah. Okay. Number one, I don't want you to put yourself at risk of getting hurt by having the dog pull you down. Okay.
I'm actually walking just where there's a fence so I can hook her to the fence if it should happen. So I don't have to hold her.
Yeah. Well, that is one option. But again, let me ask you this. How essential is it that you leash walk her? Is there a way she can get exercise in a safely fenced area? Is that possible?
Yeah, I have a pretty big backyard. We play fetch, we run around. Yeah, so she does. And I actually have found a place that is pretty isolated and I take her in the car, but she wants to look out the window and as soon as she sees a dog, she goes nuts. So I've been training her by throwing treats on the floor and she'll go down to get it.
Okay.
Until we get to the place where there are no dogs.
Yeah. Yeah. So that just diverts her attention.
Yeah, that's all it does.
Yeah, that's all it does.
Yeah.
So yeah. So like I said, number one, I don't want you to get hurt. Number two, if you have a safe place for her to get exercise, what is the benefit of leash walking her?
I thought dogs needed to walk.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's nice, but if you weigh the benefits against the disadvantages, it's a disadvantage for you because I'm thinking that if I were in your place, the minute I hooked the leash on the dog and walked out the door, I'd be thinking, oh no, what if we see another dog and so forth, and I'd be getting a tight hold on that leash. Does that sound like?
Early on, yes. Now I'm calmer because I know that I can hold her. She's an adopted dog from a friend and they couldn't manage her anymore.
Yeah.
So all her old behaviors have gotten 100% better, except this one and barking when she's in the backyard and she sees a dog come, to the fence.
Okay. Every time she barks and lunges at another dog when you're out for a walk, it's called rehearsing the behavior. And
Okay.
every time she rehearses it, it's getting stronger and stronger.
Okay.
So
Yes.
the comparison that usually, makes sense to people is, imagine that, do you live somewhere where you get a lot of snow on the ground in the winter?
Not a whole lot. And I am a retired psychiatric nurse, so I know
Okay,
all this
all
stuff.
right, you get this. You get it. You
I understand. Yes, yes.
Yeah. All right. So yeah. So it's like we're making that neural
Yeah.
pathway stronger and stronger. It's like a
Mhm.
fresh snowfall. There's no footprints in the snow at all, but you make a path from your door to
Yeah.
the street, your door to the street, and pretty soon that path gets worn down. And why would you go anywhere else in the deep snow when there's a nice path you can follow? So
Yes.
every time you rehearse it, so everybody else, so that, being, having that professional knowledge as a psychiatric nurse, you understand that these kinds of overreactive behaviors, the more you practice them, the stronger they're going to get. So Connie, my short-term advice to you, and some people are going to be really surprised that I say this, is
Mhm.
let your dog get exercise in the backyard.
Mhm.
Stop walking her. Now, I'm not
Mhm.
saying necessarily permanently, because there are dogs need to get out in the world and walk on a leash. It's an important part of being a dog. But
Right.
you need to address that leash behavior in very, very tiny steps. It's gradual exposure. And what happens is when you put the leash on her and take her outside, the exposure is too big a jump all at once. But what can you do about that? I mean, the outside world is there. You can't
Yeah.
change it. It's there.
Right.
So you need to find a way, a training system with gradual exposure. If you want my help with that, more than happy to help you.
Great.
It's a
Okay.
step-by-step gradual exposure, and it's based on um, building a new neural pathway that's
Yeah.
happy and comfortable for her.
Are you
Okay.
familiar with the canine training website?
There's so many of them
Okay.
out there, and all I can say about that, and I can't, say anything specifically because I'm not that, I don't know exactly which one you might be referring to, but any training method that goes to training first, remember that pyramid that I showed you, where
Yes.
training and problem solving is at the top of the pyramid. So
Uh-huh.
any method that goes to training without first making sure that emotional and social needs are
Mhm.
secure is
Mhm.
not going to resolve the problem in any permanent way. You
Okay.
might get what appears to be compliance, but what often happens is that compliance looks like a dog going into your, I'll use this term, the parasympathetic, I'm sorry, from
Sympathetic.
parasympathetic to sympathetic nervous
Right.
system, where the dog is feeling helpless and just shuts down. And so it looks like compliance, but it's the dog
Mhm.
shutting down, and those emotional needs aren't met. So my overall advice to all of you, if you want help with a dog that is over aroused, overreactive, extreme reaction to things, going to training first will not resolve it. You have to address
Mhm.
the emotional social needs first. And I'm not
Okay.
saying don't train your dog. I mean, I'm not saying that at all. I'm saying
Uh-huh.
that the emotional social needs have to be met first. And if a training method goes to training without addressing that, then find something that will address the emotional needs. That's my
Okay. And
specialty. That's what I do.
I will try your A stock method with her reactivity inside the house and see what happens.
Yeah, try it in a very low distracting, calm
Mhm.
environment first. Absolutely, that would be the place.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, you're welcome. Thanks for your question. Let me go up here and see. So Gret says, a friend's dog was really into leg humping. I never understood what that was really about. I assume it's an expression of anxiety. It could be. Um, sometimes people say it's dominance. That is that is something that might be addressed with just giving the dog an alternative behavior. If there's an emotional stress component, and that's one way that the dog is expressing it, then you have to deal with the emotional stress. But uh, from our human point of view, it's socially inappropriate. If it's dog to dog, sometimes the dogs will deal with it between each other. A dog might just snark at the other dog and say, hey, cut it out. And that's just, dog to dog interaction. But for us as humans, assuming that the dog is not doing it out of emotional stress, it's just a normal behavior. But for humans, it's socially inappropriate. Distract them with something else. Give them a toy to play with, give them something else to do, occupy their minds with something else. Okay. So let's see. I understand that a dog on a lead or contained in a crate in a car. She is a lab, starts growling and barking at people walking by or a car behind us. Yeah, so reactivity inside a car. Connie mentioned that too with her dogs. Yeah, and I think you're right that she doesn't feel safe. And it has to be. So again, it's the leap from where the dog feels safe to an unsafe environment. And again, the gradual exposures are difficult if we're just putting the dog in the car to go on an errand. You have to take the dog to the vet or to the groomer or something like that. And you have to put the dog in the car, and on the way, the dog sees things out the window that she barks at. Yes, the dog is detecting those things as a threat. And yes, I agree, the dog doesn't feel safe. There are ways to gradually acclimate the dog and change the dog's emotional feeling about being in the car, but it's a gradual process. And it has to do with giving the dog exercises around and in the car where the dog can feel safe. So that would be at home. And, the specific exercises that I use have to do with the things in that emotional cup chart where the dog is eating, chewing, sniffing, and so forth, things that are natural. Obviously, they can't dig if they're inside the car, but they can chew on things and on all things that create a sense of well-being associated with the car. And then very gradual steps. How gradual do those steps have to be? The dog is going to tell you. The dog will tell you how, when he's ready. And if the dogs have ways of telling you that they're ready or they're not ready. So yes, that is something. And again, that's something that, and I this is what I help people with. And it's a process. It's not, if only there were a magic answer, like a magic wand that we could just wave. But these things take time and they have to be done gradually. And a lot of it depends on the feedback you get from the individual dog, because the dog tells you when he's ready to go to the next step. And that's, reading the dog's body language is a huge piece of the process. So let me go to the next question. My highly reactive dog and I have been following a lot of this with trainers and medical trials, I guess, and my own work for about 3 years. Has learned a lot, but still reacts to a strange dog at 100 feet. Yeah, that's far. Upsetting that this is going on so long. We don't do walks. We have other dogs and 5 acres. Yeah, it can be upsetting. And Tima, I would be delighted to talk to you more about it. And again, like I said, I wish there was an answer, but these things take time. And a lot of it, depends on delving into the history of what might have gone on with the dog. Sometimes with dogs that are, rescues that we adopt, we don't always have a lot of history. But sometimes,
Marilyn.
yes.
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
Yes, he did come from Dismal. I'm not sure. He was in Dallas and brought up to Alaska, and he was like at a scale 3. He was emaciated, had
Oh, yeah.
discospondylitis.
Mhm.
He was really a mess, and he's very, 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 very Velcro bonded to me. He gets along with his dogs, or at least listens to their cues, but we have been really working on this with BAT, with CU, with individual trainers, with consultants. He's on trials of Zoloft, didn't do anything. Now we're trying Effexor. I just, timeline. What's your experience with a dog like this?
Oh, wow. I wish I could give you an answer to that. It really depends. It depends so much on just every little detail. And oh my gosh, you've done so much, Tina. You've done so much.
And he knows, he knows how to sniff. With distance, he'll go on the other side of me. He can look and go away, and then all of a sudden he's like Cujo.
Yeah.
And then he'll do the things he knows how to do. It's just.
Have you done anything with modeling your own calmness with him, like taking, I know in CU there's a section
Breathing.
on deep breathing.
Yes, and he is, yes, my word is chill, and I put my finger next to my nose, and I use it a lot when he's not reading cutoff signals from the other dog, and he's getting it more and more and more. And we've done the relaxation protocol, but it was like he didn't have any problems with it, so I didn't continue. He never moved. He's really, this, you stay and wait, and I jump up and down and sneeze and whatever. He's fine with all of that. It's fun. So I didn't do it again because he is good with that.
Yeah.
He's a mystery.
Yeah. You know what my sense is, that there's an accumulation of trauma. And just what you told me in the beginning about the condition he was in when you got him, and who knows about what history preceded when you got him. So my sense is that there's trauma that has not been addressed. Have you done any consulting work with Laura Donaldson?
No, I'm doing some consulting with Kathy Sadow. And no, the name, but what is she, a vet behaviorist?
She actually is she's certified in CU, but she is a specialist in trauma. And I just finished her course, and she delves very, very specifically into trauma.
It's, I will look it up, and
Look her
when
up.
Connie,
Actually, if you
yes,
want to send me an email, I will give you a
yes,
direct email to reach out to her.
okay.
Have you, were you in the, did you do anything with the Puppy Summit? Were you registered to?
I couldn't, no, I missed that one, and
Okay,
I'm listening to Rachel Leather's trauma one, and like Connie, I'm a retired trauma
Ah,
psychotherapist with
oh,
combat trauma, so this is like bizarre to have him. Yes,
boy,
but I will,
is your dog ever lucky to have ended up with you? Oh, goodness.
I think so, I
Yeah,
hope so, and but I
yeah.
liked what you said something that just really twigged, I can't remember. Well, about, I think the self-regulation circular pattern is helpful,
Yeah.
because sometimes I think we're
Yeah,
spinning
I
in
mean,
short
the
circles.
goal, of course, and it is self-regulation. I mean, that's what we're aiming for with the dog.
Yeah, yeah,
And in order to get them to that point, we have to give them a certain amount of freedom of choice. We have to stop directing
yeah,
them so much and start just allowing them to make their own decisions. In, you know, in a structured framework, because of course we want them to be safe, but you know, we have to do that. So if you, Tim, if you just hit reply to any email that you got from me.
okay,
It's my email
okay,
address. It's just Marilyn@marilynneely.com. It's pretty easy to remember. I will send you how to get directly in touch with Laura. And you
okay,
tell her that I
great,
sent you, and you maybe, you know, you've done so much already, you know, to set up a consult with her. Her program is called Slow Thinking is Life-Saving for Dogs. And
okay,
it's about replacing, she calls it fast twitch thinking, where it's that quick,
yeah,
you know, reflexive response. Um, to replace that with slow thinking, calm, you know, think it through first, think before
yeah,
you act,
yeah,
that kind of thing. So yeah, that would be, and
great.
if anybody else wants Laura's contact information, I'm happy to send it to you. So just reach out to me, send me an email. Happy to send it to you, and I'm sure she'll be delighted to get the referrals. So let me see. Um, yeah, so Elizabeth, you said that your dog jumps on people because he wants to say hello. He's a golden retriever. Well, of course, that's what Goldens do, right? But that kind of thing can be stressful for dogs, because it's like imagine you went up to a friend and said, hi, and you opened your arms, you wanted to give that person a big hug, and they just kind of snubbed you. That would be crushing. So I have to think that there's that tension with dogs that are super, super friendly, that we need to give them better ways to seek that friendly interaction. We don't want to crush them. We don't want to, you know, suppress them, but we want to give them other ways to ask for that friendly attention. Okay, so Juice said, what you said is very informative and wonderful. If this is all you have to say, I'm very thankful. Are you headed in the direction of training your dog to learn a cue? Hey, you know, that's interesting, because I actually did train my dog to bark on cue. And the reason I did that was so that I could give him an off switch. And yes, that's an option. You can train, yes, you can. You can train your dog to bark on cue. I wouldn't do that until the dog is a little bit more emotionally stable. But that's certainly an option. Doesn't work for everybody, and I wouldn't, you know, tell everybody this is your answer. But it's kind of a fun thing to do, because my dog barks more at a tone of voice than an actual question. So I'll let my voice go up as if I were asking a question, and he hears that as his cue to bark. So I can ask him any question at all. Um, like, you know, can you say bye-bye? And he'll go woof because of the tone of my voice. So yeah. And then when we're done, I just say, all done. We're all done. Sometimes he doesn't want to be all done, but at least he knows that that's the answer. So yeah, you can definitely do that. It's not the end all be all solution. It's kind of a fun thing to do. And I wouldn't do it first to a dog that is hyper aroused, because I think it would be very confusing to that dog. I think the dog has to have a certain amount of regulation before you go to that. My dog gets easily over aroused. This is Natalia. My dog gets easily over aroused and anxious. Our vet has the hypothesis of a neurological disorder. I've been working with him for 2 years and he's on medication, but he still has trouble adjusting to new environments. I have a hard time with the accept part of the A stack, which I see him in such distress. Yeah, you can't accept distress, Natalia. No, you can't. Before you get to the accept part, the dog has to be starting to resolve. And if you have a medical problem, that's out of my jurisdiction. And if you're working with your veterinarian and your veterinarian has a diagnosis as a neurological disorder, then you need to follow those prescriptions. And if any part of this process, if you can mirror emotional calmness for your dog by that acknowledge part, acknowledge and appreciate part. And if you're seeing that helps your dog, then I would say, go with that. Go with that. But Natalia, if you're still here, are you still here, hon? Yes. Is there anything else that you wanted to ask about that? If you're working with a, under medical direction, then that's, that overrides anything that I would tell you. Okay. Okay. Thank you much for sharing this information. Yes. Okay. If you have to go, I totally understand. If you have to leave. Okay. And I did put the link into, and before you guys leave one more time, I'll pop that link for the download in there. So go ahead and download the information, that chart about the emotional cup. And I love to howl with my dog. You know what? I have a bunch of dogs here. We have a group howl at least 2 or 3 times a day. And one of them will start it, and it's it's so loud, but it lasts a couple of seconds and it's really fun. It's really fun. I don't have any neighbors that'll bother me. Can I go back to the puppy question? Debbie, what's the puppy question, hon? Real quick, I think I missed it. Can you unmute and tell me what you wanted to ask?
Yes, thank you.
okay.
I've been having to go back and forth. Myself and actually Elizabeth, no, that was before. Sarah Jane asked also about the puppy that jumps in other dogs' faces or in people's faces. How do you stop that? He's 3 months old. Mine is a Labrador Retriever. He's 3 months. And he sometimes he recognizes no, and sometimes he chooses not to. I'm afraid I'm creating a little monster.
Yeah. I don't advocate teaching no. Instead, I advocate teaching the puppy what to do instead. So how old is the adult dog that he's jumping on?
3 years old. It's his mom.
Okay. All right. Does his mom respond when he does that?
Yes. As a matter of fact, I have stopped them from playing a number of times because I feel she's getting a little too aggressive with her play with him. And so he's responding aggressively.
What does she do that's aggressive?
She will bite at him. She is running along with him and just will toss him, and he rolls like for a few feet. And she just seems like she's being a little too harsh with him at 3 months old. I'm a
Does
little
he-
concerned about that.
Yeah.
He never yelps.
Is she
Maybe once.
hurting him? Does
I
the
don't think
puppy
so.
Cry? What does
No.
she do after she rolls him and jumps on him?
Tries to attack her again.
All right.
They seem to have a mutual, very aggressive play session, and I
A
don't
lot
think
of it-
that's
So a lot of times what looks like aggression to us is just ritualistic behavior that is normal for dogs.
okay.
And it looks scary to us. Now, I'm not there.
Right.
So I can't see it. I'm just kind of giving you a generalized answer. And of course, I don't want your puppy to get hurt. But sometimes when we interfere in the normal disciplining that a mother dog does with a baby, we sometimes make the situation confusing instead of clear to the dogs. Because
Okay.
because to them it feels natural, and when we interfere, they get confused because they don't understand what the problem is. Now, I'm not saying that that's necessarily the case of what's going on. If I could see a video, I could give you a better answer.
Okay.
If you care to, I'm more than happy to set up a one-on-one with you, and you can send me a video. I'll look at it and then I'll give you an answer. Actually, here's what I'd like you to do. Take a video on your phone, a minute or less, just long enough so that I can see what's going on. I want to see what the mom does and how the puppy reacts. And then send it to me. Now, there's different ways you can send it to me. The easiest thing is to upload it unlisted on YouTube from your phone. You can do that easily. And then send me the YouTube link unlisted. There are other ways to do it as long as I can see the video. And then what I will do is send you a video response. In other words, I'll share my screen. I'll bring the video up on my screen. I'll share my screen and I'll narrate what I see. And then if you want to follow up with me, you'll be able to, we can do that. But do
Okay.
that, send me the video. Because unless I see it, it's really hard. I don't want the puppy to get hurt.
Right. And I don't think he is, although sometimes he runs and hides under the patio table where she can't go. You know, and he'll stay under there. And then when she turns around and loses interest, he races out and
if you want to send me more than one video, you can, but just keep each one of them under a minute.
Okay. And I was away from the computer when you had up your email address.
Okay. Here, I'm going to type it in the chat for everybody.
Okay.
And I'm typing it really, really slow so that I don't put in a typo. Okay, there it is. Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah. So anybody, okay, what type thing can you teach your dog to distract the dog from jumping when I come in? Yeah, so dogs jump up to get to your face. One of my favorite things to deal with dogs that are jumping is to teach them how to target on your hand. And then you just put your hands down at the dog's eye level and they target at your hand. In other words, it's a nose touch on your hand. You start by teaching that with treats. You don't teach it when you first come in and the dog is jumping at you. You teach it when the dog is calm. And you really, really create a lot of reinforcement value and reinforcement history for the dog putting his nose on the palm of your hand. And that's my favorite thing to do for that. And that's why teaching, using the word no is, to me, it's a waste of time. Because instead of doing that, you'd be showing the dog what to do instead. To me, that just makes a lot more sense. Okay. Okay, guys, anything else that you guys want to ask? Did I miss anybody's question? If I did, unmute, pipe up and tell me, and I'll answer you. And I know some people had to leave, and that's perfectly fine. I understand we've gone on for quite a while, but I'm just thrilled to answer all your questions. That's what I love to do, is answer all these cool questions you're asking. Totally cool. Okay, if that's it, guys, this is recorded. Last night's is recorded. I'm going to email links to the recording so you can go ahead and watch them, pick up anything that you may have missed. And that is that. Okay. All right. Awesome, everybody. That's it. We'll say goodbye. And thanks for coming. I appreciate all of you. And feel free to reach out to me and my email address with anything at all that you want to ask me. I'm happy to help. Okay. Bye-bye.